What you've just heard is one of the many deaths from the monkey, the new major motion picture from Osgood Perkins, Stephen King, and James Wan. Experience it in theaters everywhere this Friday, because everybody dies, and that's life. Let's have some fun.
Hey guys, Madame Ram, starring Toni Collette, tells the dramatized true story of Georgia Frontiere, a former entertainer turned owner and heavy hitter in the boys' club that is the NFL. After her husband's mysterious death, she shocks everyone by inheriting the LA Rams and taking the reins of a major sports franchise. Relying on her wit and astrological charts to make decisions, she turns the NFL on its head and to this day remains one of the most beloved, despised, and controversial figures in modern sports. You guys, I started listening to this and I am absolutely hooked. The twists and turns, I didn't see any of them coming, and I have so many questions. I cannot wait to continue to tune in. The woman who went from singer to NFL owner, defying expectations and shaking up the world of professional football. Madame Ram dives into her relentless quest for respect, power, and a championship trophy. This isn't your typical sports story. Follow Georgia Frontiere as she navigates a male-dominated industry using star charts and sheer determination to make her mark in history. Whether you love football, powerful struggles, or just a good scandal, Madame Ram has it all. Ambition, mystery, and the unforgettable legacy of a woman who refused to stay on the sidelines. Madame Ram, the woman who took on a man's world and won. Follow Madame Ram on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Big Mad True Crime, where we get big mad over true crime. I'm your host, Heather Ashley, and today you'll be hearing part 2 of the Lynn Hernan case. Small talk sucks, so let's dive in. In part 1, we talked about how on October 3rd, 2018, Lynn Hernan was found unresponsive in her home. There were crushed pills on her chest and prescription bottles nearby. Her death was initially ruled a suicide, but after speaking to a few of Lynn's concerned loved ones, the investigation was reopened. It was then discovered that Lynn had actually been poisoned with tetrahydrozoline, which is the main ingredient in Visine. After a more thorough investigation, police began to suspect that Lynn's caretaker, Jesse Krasuski, was responsible for her murder. On July 9th, 2019, Jesse was arrested for violating probation due to previous fraud and forgery convictions. She was taken to jail, where she would stay as the investigation into Lynn's death continued. That same day, Jesse sat down with detectives to talk about Lynn's death. During this interview, detectives shared for the first time that Lynn had been poisoned with tetrahydrozoline. Jesse then claimed that there were Visine bottles all over Lynn's house, but she had never seen Lynn drink from them. She then denied having any involvement in Lynn's death, insisting that she hadn't given her any eye drops or assisted in her death in any way. Then, in a bold move, Jesse claimed that she never even heard of Visine poisoning, which was a ridiculous statement considering that she had told her boyfriend Steve back in January of 2019 that she had been hospitalized for Visine poisoning after attending a concert. Detectives did not believe a single word out of Jesse's mouth, and they were actually convinced that she had murdered Lynn and was now trying and failing to cover her tracks. Over the next 10 days, Jesse sat down with detectives 5 more times, and each time, her story just got crazier. During Jesse's second interview on July 10th, she told detectives that she wasn't buying what the medical examiner had concluded. She didn't believe that Lynn had died from Visine poisoning. After saying that, Jessie did a complete 180 and claimed that she had seen Lynn drink Visine mixed with vodka on the day before her death. According to court documents, when detectives asked why Jessie hadn't brought that up before, she couldn't figure out an answer. Jessie's story continued evolving, and she added that in the days leading up to Lynn's death, Lynn wanted to take her own life, so she started experimenting with different doses of Visine, mixing it into either water or vodka. She got extremely sick every time, but she just kept on doing it. Detectives asked if Jessie ever mixed Visine into any of Lynn's drinks for her, and she said no. But then she said that she would buy the Visine for Lynn, despite the fact that she didn't agree with how Lynn was using it. She added that she would regularly throw away water bottles because she suspected that they contained Visine. Court documents state that Jessie then told detectives that Lynn had used Jessie's phone to search for suicide methods, and that she even went as far as to purchase the gun online. Jessie claims she walked in on Lynn twice while she held the gun. Jessie allegedly saved Lynn from herself both times, but when detectives asked where the gun was, Jessie said that she had gotten rid of it, because she's such a good friend. Jessie also claimed that Lynn tried to overdose on pills twice, but both attempts failed. Jessie then told detectives that the last time she knew Lynn had mixed Visine with vodka was the night before her death, but she didn't know about the day of. She then expressed anger at Lynn for taking the easy way out. Before ending the interview, detectives asked Jessie about how she told Steve she'd been poisoned with Visine after going to that concert back in January, and at first, Jessie told detectives that Steve had misunderstood her. She said it was someone else who'd been poisoned that night, but eventually Jessie gave up and admitted that she had voluntarily drank Visine herself just to see what it was like. She said it had made her sick.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
During an interview the next day, July 11th, Jessie elaborated on Lynn's alleged habit of drinking Visine. She stated, "Lynn said she lost feeling of her body and made her feel good, and she was doing it for so long that I didn't think she was going to die from it. I really didn't. I thought, okay, she was getting some sleep from it, that's it. She was doing it for 2 months, at least." According to court documents, Jessie continued to claim that she hadn't given any Visine to Lynn on the morning of her death. But then an hour into the interview, Jessie's story shifted. Now she said that when she visited Lynn on the morning of her death, she knew Lynn had poured 6 bottles of Visine into her water bottle. Jessie pointed out a water bottle in crime scene photos and claimed it had those 6 bottles of Visine in it. She explained that at some point that morning, Lynn asked her to bring the Visine-tainted water bottle to her. Jessie didn't want to give it to her, so they argued about it for about 10 minutes or so before Jessie finally gave in and handed over the water bottle. Jessie insisted she only gave Lynn the bottle because she didn't think the Visine would kill her. Lynn had been drinking Visine for months, and she was fine, according to Jessie. Jessie said that after she gave Lynn the bottle, she left, and when she came back later, Lynn was dead. After saying all of this, Jessie told detectives that she believed she'd be going to prison for the rest of her life for helping Lynn do what she wanted, which was to complete suicide. Then Jessie claimed that was everything she knew. She had finally told detectives all of it. But in true Jessie fashion, that indeed was a lie. According to court records, during yet another interview on July 12th now, Jessie told detectives that she had items in storage under someone else's name. The items included recordings of Lynn's wishes, documents she had signed, Visine bottles which were dated for some reason, a partial firearm, and Lynn's safety deposit box. Jessie claimed that these items would prove Lynn had completed suicide and she wasn't murdered. When detectives asked why she had all of those things, Jessie said that she kept them for her own protection, just in case anything ever happened. Jessie told detectives that she would give them all of these items if her probation agent lifted her jail hold for 1 to 2 weeks so she could go get things in order. She promised that she wouldn't flee the area and graciously offered to wear an electronic monitor. One detective told her it was mind-boggling that she would withhold information that could supposedly help her case. But then Jessie changed her story yet again. Now, she was claiming that the items were not in storage. After all, they were actually sealed in freezer bags and buried several feet underground in a park. Jessie drew detectives a map, claiming it would lead them to the burial site. But when detectives followed said map, they did not find anything, and they were all shocked. The last sentence was a lie. On July 16th, Jessie told detectives that she could find the buried items herself if they allowed her to go to the park. According to court documents, detectives ultimately agreed to let Jessie direct them via video call as they searched the park where she claimed to have buried her so-called evidence. While detectives used a metal detector to search for the firearm pieces, Jessie magically remembered that the gun might have actually been made of plastic and that none of the metal firing parts were actually buried. Not surprisingly, detectives didn't find anything during that search. Later that day, detectives met with Jessie in person and questioned her about Lynn's finances and how it seemed like she had been stealing from Lynn. Jessie insisted that any transactions she made were with Lynn's full consent, that she had never written herself a check from Lynn's accounts, and she had only signed Lynn's name on a check if it was to pay a bill and if Lynn was right there with her. Jessie went on to claim that Lynn was someone who wrote more checks than anyone she had ever known. She also gave large amounts of money to people, as much as $40,000 to $50,000 in a single instance. On July 19th, a detective briefly spoke with Jessie one last time. She maintained that she had buried the items that would support her claim that Lynn's death was a suicide. However, again, none of those items were ever found. Detectives continued their investigation into Lynn's murder while Jessie sat behind bars for her probation violations. They examined Jessie's phone and discovered that in July of 2018, she had searched for criminal poisoning, cyanide poisoning, and household poisons. This only added to their pile of evidence pointing to Jessie being responsible for Lynn's murder. Detectives also spoke to several people who knew Lynn, and they all said that she was not someone who would give out large amounts of money to anybody. According to court documents, Lynn's ex-boyfriend Jim, who remained in contact with her until her death, told detectives that while Lynn was generous, she was also pretty frugal. He said she never freely gave him money. One of Lynn's other close friends described her as thoughtful and generous, but noted that she only gave expensive gifts, never cash, because she was very careful with her money. This friend further told detectives that Lynn had around $50,000, which she kept in a bank lockbox for her nephew Anthony. However, he had not been given the money after Lynn died. When police spoke with Anthony, they learned that he was very close to Lynn, who he affectionately called Auntie Lynn. He explained that he grew up spending a lot of time with her, and even after he graduated from high school and started college, they remained close. He often visited her condo, and they enjoyed going thrift shopping together. According to the Waukesha County Freeman, Anthony told detectives that he knew he was in Lynn's will, but he wasn't sure exactly to what extent. He mentioned that in the months leading up to her death, Lynn tried to discuss what she wanted him to have if anything ever did happen to her. She mentioned a lockbox at her bank containing between $50,000 or some change, which she wanted him to use for college. Lynn also told him where to find the key, which was in a cabinet. Anthony said Lynn also occasionally spoke to him about her money and how she thought it was disappearing. Anthony said that after Lynn passed, Jesse reached out to him, saying that he was a beneficiary of Lynn's estate and that they needed to meet to discuss everything. During that meeting, she had him sign a consent form, making her the personal representative of Lynn's estate, which is the same thing as being the executor. Jesse then invited Anthony and his family over to Lynn's home, telling them to take whatever they wanted. But when Anthony searched the cabinet for the key to Lynn's lockbox, it was gone. He asked Jesse where it was, and she said that the cabinet had been emptied months prior. Anthony told detectives that Jesse gave him notarized documents dated in January of 2016 outlining who would inherit Lynn's property. The documents included Jesse, Anthony's mother, and Lynn's longtime friend, but not Anthony. In addition to the documents, Jesse gave Anthony a set of letters allegedly written by Lynn. He glanced at the letters, which seemed to suggest that Lynn had been unhappy in the months leading up to her death, but Anthony didn't read them in detail because he didn't believe the handwriting was even Lynn's. Anthony told detectives that he found the documents strange because they used his mother's maiden name and misspelled her first name, something Lynn would have never done. He was convinced that none of these documents were actually written by Lynn.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now boarding Group A. Please have your boarding passes ready to scan. If your phone is cracked, old, or was chewed up by your Chihuahua travel companion, please refrain from holding up the line. Instead, go to Verizon and trade in any phone in any condition from one of their top brands for the new Samsung Galaxy S25 Plus with Galaxy AI and a watch and tab on any plan. Only on Verizon.
With new line on my plan. Service plan required for watch and tab. Additional terms apply. See Verizon.com for details.
Anthony had several other concerns. Because he was a beneficiary of Lynn's estate, he was able to review the final accounting of where all the money was going. According to the Waukesha County Freeman, when Anthony looked over the accounting, he noticed several red flags, like how Lynn had more than $100,000 in credit card debt. This was completely bizarre because Lynn had always told Anthony that she didn't have any major credit cards, aside from a Kohl's card and a few other store cards. Anthony knew that she was careful with her money and never carried a credit card balance, so seeing over $100,000 in debt was shocking to him. After all of that debt was subtracted from what the estate was worth, only $26,000 remained. Anthony confronted Jesse about Lynn's supposed debt, and Jesse managed to convince him that Lynn had truly racked up all of those charges on her own. Believing Lynn might be responsible for her estate only being worth $26,000 now, Anthony stopped pressing things and agreed to split the total amount with Jesse. But after making that agreement, Anthony couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong here. According to the Waukesha County Freeman, he retained attorney Elizabeth Taylor to look into all of it. Initially, Taylor told Anthony that everything seemed to have been done correctly with Lynn's estate, so they didn't take any further action. But then, everything changed when Anthony learned the police were investigating Lynn's murder. Once he knew that, Anthony and Taylor carefully reviewed Lynn's estate and were able to confirm that Jesse had definitely been involved in some kind of shady activity. According to Jesse's accounting, the estate made $16,000 in payment towards Lynn's supposed debts. However, when Anthony's attorney looked into this with a fine-tooth comb, she realized that the receipts for those payments were fake and the debts being paid off were Jesse's debts, not Lynn's. But that's not all. Jesse also stole approximately $50,000 from the estate by making a series of transactions, including cash withdrawals and writing checks. She also sold Lynn's house for $140,000 and used some of that money to pay off her own debt. After speaking to Anthony, detectives set out to corroborate his claims. They learned that everything Anthony said was true. When they looked into the lockbox Lynn left money in for Anthony, they found it empty. As it turns out, Lynn, Jesse, her mother Jennifer, and Anthony all had access to that safety deposit box, but Jesse was the only one who accessed it before Lynn died. Detectives examined Lynn's finances and noticed a drastic shift in Lynn's spending patterns after Jesse became her caretaker. According to court documents, before Jesse started caring for Lynn, she had nearly $350,000 across her 3 bank accounts, much of it from an inheritance she received from her parents. However, by the time of her death, her total cash assets had dwindled to just around $4,000. In one account alone, detectives found that of all of the checks written, only 2 weren't made to Jesse. A total of $134,000 had been signed over to Jesse from this account, leaving a final balance of just $88. In addition to the low cash balance, detectives learned that Lynn, who had previously used very few credit cards and paid off her balances each and every month, suddenly had over $100,000 in debt. Her account showed a pattern of multiple credit cards, all maxed out with very little being paid off over several months. Detectives were able to determine that Jesse had been using Lynn's credit cards for her own purchases. At one point, she ordered 2 unassembled guns using Lynn's credit card, but with her own phone number, like the dumbass she is. She also used Lynn's money to buy lavish gifts for herself, her friends, her boyfriend Steve, Steve's children, and even Steve's ex. Detectives further noticed a significant spike in spending during the time that Lynn was hospitalized right before her death. 48 Hours reported that during that hospital stay, around $50,000 was transferred from Lynn's account into Jesse's account. Jesse then withdrew that money from ATMs at a local casino. The extravagant spending did not stop after Lynn's death either. Just days later, Jesse bought $3,000 worth of furniture on one of Lynn's credit cards and had it delivered to the home that she shared with her boyfriend, Steve. And on top of using Lynn's legitimate credit cards, Jesse opened additional cards in Lynn's name without her permission. She even did this on the day of Lynn's death. That morning, she opened a fucking JCPenney credit card using Lynn's information, and she set the shipping address to the home she shared with Steve. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, Jesse also sold Lynn's jewelry and took out a fraudulent $30,000 loan in her name. According to court documents, detectives determined that by the time of Lynn's death, Jesse had stolen more than $290,000 from her. Her accounts were almost completely drained, and Jesse was running out of ways to steal from Lynn. But Jesse knew that she still had one more place she could rob her from: her estate, which was valued at $150,000. Detectives theorized that once Jesse realized Lynn was worth more to her dead than she was alive, she began a plot to kill her. On October 3rd, 2018, Jesse secretly put 6 bottles of Visine in Lynn's water, then gave her the bottle. Once Lynn was drowsy from being drugged, Jesse forced pills down her throat to make it look like she had overdosed on pills. Jesse then walked out the door and left Lynn to die alone. She went on to apply for that JCPenney credit card, then that evening returned to Lynn's home. She finished staging the scene to make it look like a suicide, then called 911. Days later, she was back to stealing from Lynn. With all of this uncovered, prosecutors finally felt like they had enough to charge Jesse with her murder. In June of 2021, almost 2 years after she'd been arrested for violating her parole, Jesse was charged with 1 count of first-degree homicide and 2 counts of theft. 1 count for stealing from Lynn before she died, and 1 for stealing from her after she was murdered. Jesse was held on a $1 million bond, which she definitely couldn't make, so she sat in jail like the piece of shit she was. Based on all of these developments, Anthony's attorney petitioned the probate courts to have Anthony named the personal representative of Lynn's estate, which was ultimately granted. In response, Jesse tried to submit an amended will, supposedly written by Lynn, which named Jesse and her mother as the beneficiaries of Lynn's estate because Jesse can't fucking stop herself. Of course, the judge saw right through that bullshit, and the will was not accepted. Jesse then filed several bizarre letters allegedly written by Lynn. The letters claim that her original will was actually a test for Anthony, and if he contested any part of it, he wouldn't receive anything in the real will. No. There's only one person in this entire case who would think of some fucked up shit like that, and it's the person who was about to go on trial. Opening statements in Jesse's murder trial began on October 24th, 2023. The prosecution argued that Jesse stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from Lynn, and once the money was running out, she realized that Lynn would be worth more dead. So she decided to poison Lynn using eye drops and staged the scene to look like an overdose suicide. Immediately after Lynn's murder, Jesse continued to steal from her. According to court documents, the defense told the jury that Jesse was completely innocent of everything the prosecution was accusing her of. They even had the audacity to describe Lynn as like a mother to Jesse. They said, if Lynn Hernan were here today, she would say, "Are you crazy, prosecution? That's my daughter you have sitting at that desk over there. That's my daughter." The defense said Lynn's death wasn't a murder at all. It was actually a polydrug overdose suicide. They claimed Lynn was purposefully consuming a combination of various pills, alcohol, and eye drops to end her life. The defense told the jury Lynn liked her vodka. She also liked Visine. I have no idea why. Then they said that it wasn't possible for the Visine alone to have killed Lynn because no one has ever died from Visine. It's never happened, which frankly isn't true at all because we've covered another case about it. But let's keep going. The defense claimed that Lynn was the one who drained her own bank accounts. They said she did it because she'd been threatened with the possibility of being placed in a nursing home. That one's new. The defense went on to say that any money given to Jesse was a gift that Lynn wanted her to have because she was planning to take her own life. According to court documents, Jesse did not testify at her own trial. Instead, the defense called witnesses to support the claim that Lynn was sick and suicidal prior to her death. One of those testimonies came from Jesse's mother's friends, who said Lynn talked about wanting to take her own life and rambled about her will and jewelry before her death. The defense also presented witnesses who claimed that Lynn didn't die from tetrahydrozoline poisoning. A forensic pathologist testified that Lynn's medical history had a significant impact on her cause of death. The pathologist concluded that her cause of death was mixed drug toxicity, with the manner of death being undetermined. A toxicologist further testified that based on Lynn's toxicology results, she would have had to have ingested between 33 and 42 pills before her death. The toxicologist argued that if Lynn had been dosed with tetrahydrozoline, it would have been impossible to force pills down her throat because she would have been too drowsy. After 10.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jesse guilty of all charges: murder and 2 counts of felony theft. Jesse was set to be sentenced soon after, but then this case took a wild turn when an envelope containing 37 pages of handwritten letters was sent to a friend of Jesse's. 48 Hours reported that the letters were written by Jesse on the back of her trial notes. In the letters, Jesse basically asked her friend to fabricate evidence to prove Jesse's innocence. She gave her friend directions on how to impersonate Lynn and submit that fake evidence to the judge, the local media, and even the governor to try and clear Jesse's name. One of the things Jesse wanted her friend to do was make a voice tape pretending to be Lynn. Jesse even described Lynn's voice in the letter, saying she has an older, raspy female voice. Jesse directed her friend to say things like, "I cannot go on anymore," and "I chose to drink Visine and end my life." The friend handed over the letters to the sheriff's department, and when they asked Jesse about them, she, of course, denied writing them. The sheriff's department didn't believe her and opened an investigation. According to 48 Hours, they found video footage from Jesse's jail cell taken just days before the envelope was given to the police, and the video showed Jesse placing papers into an envelope and leaving it on the bed of another inmate, who later took it to a mail drop-off. This video, combined with the fact that the letter was written in Jesse's handwriting, was enough proof for the sheriff's department to determine that Jesse had written the letters asking her friend to commit fraud. On April 5th, 2024, Jesse's sentencing hearing was held. During the hearing, the prosecution presented evidence of the letters to point out that Jesse was still engaging in fraudulent behavior. They asked the judge to sentence Jesse to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lynn's loved ones read victim impact statements, also calling for life without parole. Lynn's ex-boyfriend Jim said, "Jesse poisoned Lynn like she was a rodent." He then addressed Jesse directly, saying, "The devil awaits you. I hope you rot in hell. Lynn is an angel in heaven. May you rest in peace, Lynn. You're dearly missed and always will be. I'm so very sorry." According to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Lynn's nephew Anthony said the family was going to focus on healing, and he hoped Jesse would spend time reflecting on her actions. He said, "I hope you know your charade is up, and you will never fool anyone again." The defense asked the judge to show leniency towards Jesse. They had 2 people read victim impact statements, including Jesse's mother, Jennifer, who said, "This has been an extremely hard 5 years." She mentioned that Lynn was like family to both her and Jesse, adding, "The one thing I am sure of is Jesse did not kill Lynn." Before handing down the sentence, Judge Jennifer Doro asked Jesse if she had anything to say. Jesse then spoke for the next 2 hours, maintaining that she was completely innocent. Jesse denied writing the letter sent to her friend and repeated that she did not kill Lynn. She claimed that the only thing she was guilty of was being a loyal friend. Look both ways before you have that much audacity. According to 48 Hours, Jesse said, "Let's be very clear here. There was no murder. I did not commit murder. I did not poison Lynn, give her pills, or anything else. It is a lot to be accused and convicted of murder when I didn't do it." She started choking up here, adding, "You're holding me responsible for what she did." Jesse also claimed that her previous attorneys were ineffective and argued that she didn't get a fair trial. She declared, "I will not stop fighting." She said she no longer had faith in the justice system. However, she still had faith in God. She told the court, "As God as my witness, this case is far from over." She promised to file an appeal. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported that Judge Jennifer Duro then shared her thoughts with Jesse. She said she believed Lynn's death was premeditated, stating, "Tetrahydrozoline was not something we expected to find, and I do believe it was something you, Jesse, banked on no one testing for. I have to ask out loud, it's a rhetorical question, but were you poisoning Lynn all along?" Judge Duro expressed her belief that Jesse had used tetrahydrozoline to control Lynn prior to her murder, and that Lynn's death was definitely not a suicide. She pointed out that Jesse's version of events was full of holes and said that Jesse had a pattern of taking advantage of people. She said, "You took away future memories, birthdays, luncheons, phone calls. I think you thought you were a very good thief and could get away with even more." She also added, "I think you're completely diabolical. You have evil in your heart." In the end, Judge Duro sentenced Jesse to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. She acknowledged that Jesse's actions were completely diabolical. However, she noted that everyone has some redeeming qualities. She said, "I think this is one of those cases to make you eligible for extended supervision at some point." And I can't say that I agree, but according to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Judge Duro added that Jesse had very real potential to sell her story. Because of that, Jesse was ordered to pay over $386,000 in restitution, with an escrow account to be set up for any money that she might earn through interviews, book deals, movies, or documentaries about the case. And that I do appreciate. Additionally, Judge Duro ordered Jesse's mother to turn over Lynn's cremated remains to Lynn's family within 48 hours. The fact that that had to be ordered makes my skin crawl. Following Jesse's sentencing, Anthony told the media that he was extremely satisfied with the outcome. He said the family looked forward to laying Lynn to rest the way she would want once they received her remains, which frankly they should have had all along. For photos pertaining to this case, check out Lynn's highlight at the top of my Instagram profile at @TheHeatherAshley, and join me there at 2 p.m. Eastern on the first Monday of every month, where you go live with me and we talk about today's case and all other true crime cases on your mind. If you're tired of listening to ads and you want to hear episodes ad-free and even get access to bonus episodes, subscribe on Apple Premium or head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/BigMadTrueCrime, where for just $2 whole a month, your episodes are totally ad-free. If you have a case you'd like to hear covered, please share it with Big Mad True Crime on social media, because all cases are covered by listener request, and I will be bringing you a brand new case next week, and I cannot wait. But until then, we out. All right, guys, we are officially at the end of this episode, which means that it's time for me to read a review that made my entire day. This one is from Detective in Another Life. It says, "I'm a true crime fan. Watch the usual shows, Dateline, 48 Hours, and tons of investigation discovery. Although I've seen many of your stories on these and other shows, I love listening to your no-nonsense, no holding back, no small talk take on the stories. There are times when, although these are serious matters, you've made me giggle, and saying out loud while alone in my car, "You go, girl. Keep it up, and we'll keep listening." I love you so much, Detective in Another Life. We are all best friends here. And what is true crime if we cannot shit on perpetrators? Fuck them. They take good people, and there is zero respect to be had for them. Not a lick. Not even a little bit. Nope, nope, nope. So, anywho, thanks for being nice for literally no reason. It made my day. All right, guys, we are really at the end of the episode this time, which means it's time for the hot take. This is kind of an issue I see a lot, whether it's my other job or the podcast, whatever, where it's people get a million chances to do the wrong thing. She's let out on bail. She did it again. Let out on bail. Did it again. Let out on bail. Did it again. Spent a year. Got let out on bail. Escalated. And then Lynn died. She stole from Lynn before she died. She stole from Lynn after she died. Went to really any extent to get monetary gain. This woman had no fucking morals whatsoever. And once again, what do you have to do to get somebody life in prison without the possibility of parole? Please do tell me the potential this bitch has. Somebody make it clear. I understand that she's getting 40 years, but is that cutting the sentence in half for good behavior or time earned through whatever the fuck you can earn time for in prison? So is it really 20 years? Is that all that Lynn's life was worth? Was 20 years of time out? You can't be serious. Look, I know that an eye for an eye is not the answer to crime, right? However, what is the deterrent if the deterrent is always less? I mean, I'm going to break this down to time out with children. If you count down to 3 and the kid is still dancing on the table, throwing flour around the room, and you just want them to stop, and you get to 1 and you just start counting down from 3 again, what is the deterrent? That is essentially what happens every time this woman makes bail. And let's talk about bail for a second when your crime is about stealing fucking money. Are we giving a shit where the money is coming from that's paying her bail? Or are we just going, oh, it would suck if it was stolen money, but like bail's bail? Ugh. So much of the justice system just truly needs to be reformed, in my opinion, because we're creating a scenario where there is an acceptable level of lawlessness within the community because lessons are not being learned. I'm not in the camp of everyone goes to jail forever for doing everything ever wrong. What I am saying is you have to stop normalizing short stints in jail because everyone knows that the sentence isn't really the sentence. Why are we calling it 40 years if we know we can cut it in half? They're going to get out in 20. Call it 20. Do you feel special in the legal system for saying it was 40 because it makes you feel better? Say the quiet part out loud. Say at the sentencing, I'm giving you life in prison, but it's not really life in prison. It's actually 40 years, but it's not actually 40 years because you're going to get time off for good behavior, and there might be credited earning time you can get. So it could be more like 15 to 20 years. So that's the final disposition. That doesn't sound as good, does it? But the legal system keeps being able to say dumb shit like it's life in prison with possibility of parole after 40 years. Nobody talks about the fact that it's really like 20, but then credit received could be 15. Who fucking knows? Call it what it is. Don't call it a life sentence if they're not going to die in prison. Don't call it 40 years if they're going to get out before 40 years. Be honest. Say the truth. Say the quiet part. So you have to live with it because the victim's family has to fucking live with it. And you know who else might have to live with it? God forbid, this woman or anybody else who gets out on these cheap-ass, bitch-ass sentences because apparently the legal system thinks that taking someone's life was only worth 20 years. Heaven forbid they victimize another person. Then who is it on? Then do you feel better? What if they couldn't have done it if they were actually in for the 40 years you talked about? Who is held responsible for this shit? Of people bonding out or getting out early and then committing more crimes, creating victims, then Maybe one day, getting a longer sentence. Oh, we thought they were redeemable. We wanted to give them a second chance. Second chances are not fifth and sixth and seventh chances. They're not for people who escalate their crime. There has to come a point where you have to stop feeling bad about punishing people, rightfully so. That is the consequence of your actions. If that is not the purpose of the justice system, I don't know what the fuck is. Soapbox. Man, I got real mad. Anywho, I love you guys. This pisses me off. Fuck. Okay, I love you. Okay, bye.